Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the East Riding of Yorkshire series. Together with the unparished city of Hull, it forms the county of the same name. There's 172 parishes here. Which one are we in today? Welcome back to the East Riding of Yorkshire, everybody. Now, you've seen some episodes just recently where it's been really cold. Well, I can tell you this is the coldest of the most recent ones. It's -6 out here, believe it or not. But I'm not surprised it's so cold because this is a very open, exposed part of the East Riding, and there are some icy roads out here as a result. Our start point in this one is going to be this church in a moment, but also just next to the church there's a very nice information board which tells you all about this place. Welcome to the settlement of the Springs, otherwise known as Nunburnholme. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome to Nunburnholme in the East Riding of Yorkshire, which is situated approximately 3 miles to the east of the market town of Pocklington. Nunburnholme has one of the more complicated names in the East Riding, and it derives its name from the Old English Burnholme, which means stream or spring with an island. This was spelt various ways in medieval times, including as Brunnum and Brunne, to name but two. Nun was added sometime before the 16th century as a reference to Nunburnholme Priory. Speaking of the Priory, it's one of the landmarks within the village which we can get close to. The site of it lies to the north of the village green, alongside Nunburnholme Beck. It's a linear village which doesn't have a lot of amenities to its name, although it used to. Thanks to the very detailed information boards around the place, I can tell you all about them. Nunburnholme's boundaries extend quite a way north of the village and take in another small settlement, one with a landmark like no other which the channel has ever seen. And of course, its name was used elsewhere in the East Riding, as the village gave its name to the former railway station at Burnholme, which we talked about in the Hayton episode. It was a cold and frosty morning here, but this was an altogether fascinating village. It's time to go again in the East Riding. We start at the Grade 1 listed Church of St James at the southernmost extent of Nunburnholme's long main street, which leads to Burnholme to the south. St James's is noted for two former incumbents, these being the Reverend Francis Orpen Morris, author of works on natural history, and his son, the Reverend Marmaduke Charles Frederick Morris, antiquarian and author. The church was restored between 1872 and 1877, which led to a discovery: 2 sections of a late Anglo-Saxon cross shaft. Known as the Nunburnholme Cross, it now stands within the church. The shaft is highly ornamented, depicting Anglo-Saxon Christian figures, an unusual haloed warrior, and it has some later pagan, Viking and Norman additions. From the churchyard you can get an idea of the landscape Nunburnholme sits in. The village is flat, but this is the East Yorkshire Wolds, so there are hills around. If any of these shots seem shaky, it's nothing to do with the camera, it's just that I'm shivering so much out here. I've only just started this morning, so once I've warmed up a bit, I'll probably feel a bit warmer, but at the moment, with it being -6, standing around is not a good idea. So on that note, let's head into Nunburnholme village, up this one long street. It's a very linear place. We'll walk to the top and walk back down again. So here's Church Lane, which runs in a northeasterly direction up to the middle of the village, where the road changes its name to Town Street. On the way, we encounter the Yorkshire Wolds Way as it makes its way through the village. The Wilberforce Way also passes through Nunburnholme on its route between Hull and York. Next, it's the phone box. This still has a working phone, but it's under threat, it seems. The sign on the door is urging people to use it or lose it. The rest of Church Lane is residential. Most people who live here these days work in the local towns, but it's not that long ago that this was a village full of farmers. In the late 19th century, most worked in some capacity for Charles Wilson, the MP for Hull and head of the world's biggest shipping line. There's more on him in a future episode. Just before we hit Town Street, we find the former village school. This dates from around 1854 and it closed in 1958. Okay, so we've effectively reached the centre of the village, and there's a nice little shelter here which looks like an old garden shed. I'm not sure if it was a bus stop at some point, but it's now a book stop, if not a bus stop. There's a few things here. In here we've got the parish notice board on the wall here. I'll leave a card on that in a moment. There's plenty of books for the local book exchange. There's something here called the Link, which looks like local magazine of some description. It's free, so I'll take one and we'll see what that's all about. More village notices on the other side, some adverts, and then we've also got another information board. It's exactly the same as the one we saw outside of the church. Now, I can show you on this map where we are. We're there at the corner of Town Street. Now I'm going to carry on up this road to where it crosses this beck. There's a site of an old nunnery just here, so I'm heading basically for that, and then I'll turn around at that point and come back down here. There are some other things out towards Pocklington along Lowfield Lane and Butts Lane. We've got Millennium Oak here, for example, but I'm not walking down there. I'm basically just going up there and then walking back to the church, and then after that I'm heading up here because there's another settlement up there which falls within Nunburnholme's boundaries. And as if all that wasn't enough in this shelter, there's also something on the wall outside. An artist's impression of an Iron Age burial in a square barrow cemetery at Nunburnholme Wood, showing a pig about to be placed in a grave, a mark of high status in the burials of the Arras culture. Note the wooden structure inside the grave. And there's another one there. Isn't that interesting? Right, let's carry on walking. I could have spent all day in this shelter, but I don't quite have that much time on my hands these days. I left a card and moved on. However, there is some more artwork to see before we go. This depicts the medieval village of Brunnum, which predated the modern village and was laid waste during the harrying of the north. So now we're on Town Street, and this has altered a fair bit over the years according to those information boards. For starters, there was once a Wesleyan chapel. In fact, there were two. The original was built in 1828. Its replacement came in 1879, built by William Ranger of London. It lasted until 1974, when it was sold to a private buyer, but it's since been demolished. Nunburnholme also used to have a pub as well called the Devonshire Arms, and it was located close to this bridge over Nunburnholme Beck, where Town Street becomes Nunburnholme Hill. Okay, so we've reached a small green, which is quite crunchy underfoot because there's still plenty of autumn leaves on the ground. And of course, they're frozen. With it being -6, I'm not surprised. Okay, we're going to head up the Nuns Walk, which is what this road turns into. It turns into a footpath, and then it comes back on itself. I'm hoping there's a bridge over the Beck, because if there is, there's a path on this side which comes back to this green, and then we'll head back down to the car the way we came. So let's go. If you carry on along the side of the Beck, Town Street becomes the Nuns Walk, although the maps on the information boards are a little inaccurate. That's because they show you can walk alongside the Beck beyond the gate at the end of the road, but you can't. It's private land beyond that point. No matter though, because we're pretty much looking at the site of Nunburnholme Priory here. It was a priory of Benedictine nuns founded during the reign of Henry II by an ancestor of Robert de Merle, the Lord of Morpeth. It was a small priory, the poorest and smallest of the Benedictine nunneries in Yorkshire. It possessed very little property, and records from 1521 show only 5 nuns and the prioress lived here. In 1536, the house was suppressed. The site of the priory is a scheduled monument with extensive earthworks and a group of well-preserved but now dry fish ponds. Alright, so after walking back down Town Street, we're back to the centre of the village where the little shelter is with all the books and things in it. Now, even though we're not walking up here at Butts Lane, I am about to drive up there because Nunburnholme's parish boundaries cover a very small settlement just to the east of Pocklington called Percy, and that has something really interesting in it that we've never ever seen before. Let's go and check it out. This is Kilwick or Kilnwick Percy. There are 2 main things of note in this little hamlet. This 120-acre championship golf course is one of them. The other is Kilwick Percy Hall. Its entrance gates are right opposite the golf course. Now, forgive me if I don't get this word right. The hall is now used as the Madhyamaka Kadampa Buddhist Meditation and Retreat Centre. Everyone is welcome to visit Kilwick Percy Hall, and its grounds are open every day from dawn until dusk. Here's a bit of history about the place. The Kilwick Percy estate and hall have been owned by several different families in its time. The hall that exists today isn't the original. Not much is known about the original, except that it had a thatched roof. In 1570, work began to replace it with a stone mansion in the Elizabethan style. However, the owner at that time, Thomas Wood, died before the work was completed, and the house remained uncompleted for 100 years. In 1702, the hall and estate were bought by the Anderson family, who completed work on the house and created a formal parkland with carriage drives. It's had many owners since then, but in 1986, the Buddhists bought it all. It now features a World Peace Cafe, a gift shop, a B&B, and you can have a guided house tour as well. So yeah, you are entitled to be here because obviously it's open to all. And an impressive building, isn't it? Kilnwick Percy Hall. And these are public footpaths as well. You're perfectly entitled to walk on these too. There's a lake down there somewhere, which I imagine is very much frozen over at the moment. I think it's somewhere in that sort of direction. There's also another building of some description that's religious. If you look on the map, there's like a cross, Christian cross, somewhere out that direction. Now, I'm not quite sure what it is or where it is, so I'm not going to go to it, but I imagine that's also of interest too. So if you come here, you can have a nice walk around the lake, find that building I've just been talking about, and then you can come back here and go into the cafe, I suppose. So yeah, well worth coming to. I couldn't let that other religious building go without finding out something about it. It turns out it's a Norman church dedicated to St. Helen. It was never the plan to walk to it, but it would have been a little daft anyway. It's a redundant church which is not open to the public, so I made a good decision. The church is seemingly difficult to access too. It's located down a slope to the south of the hall, half hidden in a copse in a field grazed by sheep. To the south of the church are hollow ways and traces of house platforms which mark the site of a small village which was deserted in the early 18th century. The church is late 12th century in origin, but it was rebuilt by J.B. and W. Atkinson in 1865, maintaining the original ground plan. Inside, St Helens is filled with an eclectic collection of post-Reformation furniture collected by Robert Denison, one of the former owners of Kilnwick Percy Hall. And here ends another fabulous episode of the East Riding. In very wintry conditions. The wolds are going to look beautiful in this next episode as well, with all the snow and the ice and frost on them. We're heading up now into the highest part of the East Yorkshire wolds, so I'm expecting to see some fabulous views where I'm going next. For now though, this has been the parish of Nunburnholme, and I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.